Welcome to anybody who's watching the recording, and to Melinda, who's dialed in from Phoenix, Arizona. Very welcome here today. I'm Alison Coates. I'm based in Durban, South Africa, and I am an emotional intelligence practitioner. I'm accredited through a company called GENOS International. I haven't always been an emotional intelligence practitioner. I spent most of my career as a management consultant working in people and change and supporting projects and programs with change management activities. And now that I'm in the space in the EI space, I see so many opportunities for change leaders to really leverage off the competencies and the skills that in the world of emotional intelligence now offers to us. So really the intention behind this series of webinars that I do, and I do webinars for project managers and change managers. So it's usually in and around the professional services space, is really just to take some of the thoughts and ideas that I've had since leaving that profession about some of the things that I wish maybe I had known 10, 15 years ago. So I hope you find today interesting. Please feel free to use the chat. If you have any questions, I'll keep an eye on the chat. You can also raise your hand. It's a small classroom, so we can be as interactive as we need to. And I can just... Today's session is all about navigating change. And whilst we are talking about change management in our organizations, I think that we can also use some of what I'm sharing today around navigating change in our world, really. So what are we noticing in 2022? I don't know what it's like where you are at. And I know we've got Melinda's here from Phoenix, Arizona. Maybe Katerina, you might just like to put it into the chat where you are based. I'm South Africa in Durban. I just feel like the world, even though we've come out of this phase of, hi, Katerina, lovely to see you. Even though we've come out of this phase, and I don't know what it's like where you are at, but we seem to be coming out of all of the hard lockdowns, and thank goodness things are starting to feel a little bit more relaxed where we are, but it still feels really complex. For me, I'm working remotely, but I'm also working in person. I'm working in person, but I'm having to take note of all of the new protocols around keeping space and being aware of some of the COVID protocols, making for very complex ways of engaging with our clients. But complexities around some of the decisions that we also have to make in the world that we live in today. There's a lot of noise. There's a lot of things going on. We're very busy in our lives, in our communities, in our space that we share with our families, with our friends and our colleagues. And I think that what I hear a lot of my clients talk about, and maybe they don't use exactly this word, but I know the meaning and the sentiment behind it is overwhelm. Just this complexity and noise. So, you know, rather than planning our way into the future, which is what we were able to do 10, 15, 20 years ago, we've really got to get a little bit more agile in our thinking. We've got to start to be able to start fast and finish strong, especially when it comes to change, because if we can support our teams and our organizations in being able to start fast, it means that we gain momentum so much sooner, and we are able to start taking people on the journey with us. So supporting ourselves and our clients in better being able to navigate change is what is going to be really important. We've got our own methodologies that we would use. We've got our processes and our procedures. What I've realized and learned in the last 5 years since leaving corporate, and I'll talk to this point a little bit more in the session, it's a lot to do with our own mindset as change leaders ourselves, and how we go about supporting our clients in navigating change. Please feel free to pop questions into the chat. We can have this be as interactive as we like. So what I do with my clients when I'm working with my clients, either as when I do straight emotional intelligence assessments and coaching, and I run training off the back of that, but I also work with clients with bespoke leadership and management style training, is I really support them in being able to build their own awareness of self. I find that this is really important. It's been such a game changer for me in learning more about my emotional awareness, my own awareness around my physical and mental energy, especially in the workplace. And when we can work on our own awareness, it helps us to show and support our clients in better being able to connect with each other and to collaborate, because we can engage at a far more appropriate level. And by doing this, the work that I do in the EI space and in the training and development space is really focused on improving people's skills so that we can advance the teams and the organization through that change journey. But for me, it absolutely has to start with that awareness of self before we go to awareness of others and the wider world. So our agenda today is very simple. The first thing I'd like to do is set our context. We're going to talk a little bit around the roles of emotions, and then 3 emotional intelligence skills that I hope you will find useful in helping to reduce resistance to change, be it in your professional, and you might even like to try some of these skills in your personal life as well. I always say to my clients, let's practice some of these things in a very forgiving environment, which is often our personal environment, before we go and practice them in the professional environment. So I'd like to do a closed eye exercise with you before we actually get into the content of today. And for this, just sit comfortably in your chairs and put your feet on the ground. Always a great thing to do when we're feeling like we've got a lot of thoughts running around in our head, or we're feeling quite busy. Just uncross your legs, both feet on the ground. Shuffle in your seat so you can sit nice and comfy, shoulders down. And just take in a very, very gentle, deep breath in through the nose and out. And just release any thoughts and any tension that you have in your body. And as you release those thoughts, and as you take in your next breath, I want you to think about all of the people in your team that you work with on a day-to-day basis, be it in your corporate team or maybe with your clients. I want you to think about all these people and really bring them into your mind's eye. And as you take your next very deep, energizing breath in, I want you to think about everybody that your team might come into contact with on a day-to-day basis. These are your suppliers, your contractors, your peers, and your colleagues. Who are the people that your team come into contact with? And breathing again as you take in your next breath, a really expansive, energizing breath, thinking about the cities, the services, all of the other businesses that support these teams in being able to support your team in executing their business. These are the stakeholders that enable your suppliers and contractors, and they support your teams. And beyond these cities, as we take in our next and 4th breath, think beyond your city and think about maybe the state that you are in, the province, the country. Go beyond the boundaries of your city. We operate in such a beautiful global environment now. Think about all of the people in these spaces that support the city that you live in, the services that support your team, and your team who support you. And I really encourage you to please hold on to these really expansive thoughts as we go through the session today. And taking one final deep breath in, really expansive, energizing, clearing breath. And when you are ready and have exhaled, feel free to open your eyes. And based on this exercise, just hold these two questions in your thoughts. What do they need me to learn here today? All of these people who support you in this beautiful global world, what do they need you to learn here today? And the second question, what does the future me need to learn here today? What does the future me need to focus on here today? Because the future is approaching us faster than we can think. We've got to learn ourselves into the future. So by building the curiosity about what do they need me to learn, and the curiosity about what does the future me need to focus on, we really set ourselves up for that expansive learning and decision making. And in the workplace today, if I now bring you back just to focus in on your workplace, you know, we all experience a wide range of emotions on a day-to-day basis. Some of them are pleasant, some of them are unpleasant. Your colleagues, your suppliers, your stakeholders will go through the same emotional roller coaster, minute to minute, meeting to meeting, experience to experience. And the thing that we know about neuroscience now is that our emotions influence our decisions and our behaviors. And because it influences decisions and behaviors, it therefore influences performance in very interesting ways. Now, when we decide we're going to implement change in the workplace, this is going to create some upheaval for the most part. And these emotions can be really heightened because we know from human nature, from human social sciences, that for the most part, people actually don't feel comfortable moving away from what they know. They resist change because change involves some form of emotion. People are having to confront what is unfamiliar. People are having to face different ways of working things. People are having to let go of what they know of. And these type of emotions around anxiety, fear, and the unknown can start to get heightened during change processes. Because when we change things, we are targeting and influencing people's assumptions, their values, their beliefs, and to a large extent, their personal identity. And this can make change really hard for some. And what we have learned is that every organization therefore has an emotional culture. And when I talk about an emotional culture, we'll talk about this when we've gone through the 3 skills. This is different to a cognitive culture. Your cognitive culture is based on your values, your beliefs. Your emotional culture is how people feel in the workplace. And change is all about driving that engine of change through the organization. If you are the change leader, the manager, the practitioner, whatever label your organization has given you, we can be many different parts. Even project managers are driving change. You are the engine of that change. And I encourage you really just to consider the distinction here between transformational leadership and transactional leadership. We all have to do certain things in our jobs. We have to follow methodologies, follow processes, follow protocols. That's very transactional. As leaders and as people who need to influence how people make decisions and the steps that people take, we are operating in a far more transformational space. We are stimulating and providing that enthusiasm for people moving forward. And we are helping people to articulate a vision for themselves. So there's two different forms of leadership. Neither one is right nor wrong. There's rather a blend of the two. But I'd highlight to say that when we are helping people to go on a journey with us, we really want to focus on those transformational leadership skills. So let's have a look at this change journey. And if you're involved in change, you'll be familiar with the change curve, with the, the forming, norming, and storming that we go through when we're taking people through a change experience. And we know that change, there's a start and an end, just like any process. And in our change journey, what we tend to find is in this process, there's a huge range of emotions that people will feel. Starting from feeling quite uneasy or anxious at the start, through to some people might think this is not for me. They might even decide to exit. They might decide to disengage, through to where we want to ultimately take our teams to that wonderful place where they start to buy in and accept the change so that they can actually themselves become advocates of the change. The challenge is the change process itself is very complex. It's very noisy because no two people are going through the same stage in the change process at exactly the same time. And this complexity and noise can lead to overwhelm in the team or teams that are going through the change process. This is what we need to manage as change leaders. And we do all experience a wide range of emotions in the workplace. Our emotions will influence our decisions and our behaviors. When we find that the emotional culture in your organization is mostly productive emotions, we have a broaden and build effect. In other words, people are more likely to engage with you, to engage with the work, and to engage with the tasks that you are asking them to execute, because they feel confident, they feel included, they feel there is purpose to the work that they're doing. On the other hand, when we find that your emotional culture is mainly unproductive emotions, confusion, anxiety, fear, disillusionment, we have a very narrowing and limiting effect on our organizational change. People become quite blinkered in their thinking, and they even become defensive in their behaviors. In this type of organization, people will disengage, not only with you, but also with the work that you are asking them to do. So paying attention to how our teams are really feeling is part of your success criteria as a change leader. And this next slide illustrates it really well. In the change journey, change comes with disruption. It's natural for people to feel these unproductive emotions. It's natural for somebody to feel a little bit anxious about doing something for the first time, or anxious that their job role might change. These are natural. During this disruptive time, we could find that the behaviors that we see in the workplace are very much representative of what you're seeing on the screen here. So people are more problem focused when they are worried. People are very reactive when they are anxious about something. This is natural. What we want to be able to do is move people into a far more productive way of thinking and being, where they feel consulted and informed and valued. And here we see a very different type of behavior being demonstrated in the organization, because here people have got certainty and they feel connected, not only to each other, not only to the organization, but to the work that they are executing. So our role in change is to move people as seamlessly as we can from that disruption through into connection. And there are various ways that we can do this using some of the emotional intelligence tools and skills, because emotional intelligence is a set of learned skills. We can all learn the competencies and skills that make up the EQ model. And they're skills that make people great at managing themselves and interacting with others. And when we are better able to self-regulate and interact and inspire others, we demonstrate a far more effective leadership style. And our relationships and our management, decision-making and productivity and our own well-being is far more heightened. So emotional intelligence is that ability to make intelligent decisions based on the emotions that you are perceiving, despite the disruption that you are going through. Any questions so far, you're welcome to pop them into the chats or raise your hand. If there aren't any questions, then I'll carry on with the presentation and on the slides. Great. So what we know, and for the most part, when we are introducing change into organizations, we are working in some form of project or initiative. So we are rolling out something new, or there's a maintenance project to introduce new software, new way of doing things. For the most part, and I mean very broadly, we're working in a projects environment. And we know from many research articles, I'm not going to get into all the research articles, that your success factor is around about 80% your human factors, your leadership skills, your problem-solving abilities, your communication styles, your ability to connect, your ability to inspire, and 20% your technical factors. And by technical factors, I'm talking about our methodologies, our processes, our policies, our accreditations even. So bearing this in mind, what I want you to think of is when we are trying to take people on a change journey, we've got to remember the human factors. People are not going to change when we want them to. People change when their perspective changes. And it's up to us as change leaders to support our teams and our organizations in changing their perspective. But we can't hope to change somebody's perspective if we don't first understand their perspective. So that curiosity that I spoke about at the beginning of the session, what do they need you to learn? It's a great question to ask yourself when you're working with your stakeholders. What do they need from me today? What do I need to learn about my stakeholders today? Build that expansive and broad perspective around your stakeholder environment so that you can support them through the change journey. can see we've got a question. No question, just curious on how to do it. Yes, we're going to get into that. Great question. Thank you so much, Katerina. I love people who ask me the how question. That's the best part. It's like the cherry on the top. So how? I'm going to introduce you now to a model of emotional intelligence that I'm accredited in. It's an international organization. I did mention it in my introduction, which you missed, Katerina. I'm accredited through a company called GENOS. You can see the logo on the slide. And in the GENOS model, there are many models of EI. We are very closely aligned to Daniel Goleman's model, but we have 6 competencies in our model. And the competencies are, as you can see, building on the screen: self-awareness, awareness of others, authenticity, that ability to really be genuine and trustworthy, emotional reasoning. Emotional reasoning is that ability to think expansively, to have a broad perspective on things, to be open-minded and curious. Self-management, here we talk about self-regulation, not only about your moods and your emotions, but please remember, self-management is also about managing your energy. It's about managing your attention. It's about managing your time. And then lastly, inspiring performance. As leaders, like I said earlier, as leaders, we want to be and pay attention to our transformational leadership skills. And this model is going to support you with that. I would love to have the time to get into all 6 of these, but with only having an hour together with you, I've picked out the 3 that are really going to help you as change leaders in that, how do I then go and do this, Alison? And that's what we're going to focus on for the remainder of the session today. So, broadly speaking, for the most part, the thing that we struggle with when we are navigating change is moving our stakeholders through this reluctance and resistance. They're reluctant to adopt things. They resist change. They're reluctant to try new ways of doing things. They resist working to new standard operating procedures, whatever it might be. And there are many reasons for this reluctance. And at the most part, it's because we're human. So as humans, we are reluctant to do things that threaten our own identity. When I left corporate after having been a management consultant and a project manager for nearly 20 years, for about a year, I struggled to find myself because my identity was so wrapped up in who I was at work. And when we're changing things for people, we are in some way threatening one's identity. People might not feel confident and comfortable with the change because it's unfamiliar. We know from neuroscience that a confused mind will always say no. So when people don't have that clarity, they're going to check out. They fear losing something that's comfortable or something that's meaningful to them. Perhaps it's actually nothing that you've done or that your current organization are doing. Perhaps it's something that occurred to them in a previous role that they found really stressful and threatening. So they're carrying that traumatic experience into the future. We've got to navigate this world of reluctance and resistance. When applying emotional intelligence as change leaders, we can really support our teams in overcoming this resistance by encouraging them to be curious about learning. There are ways that we can do this. We can support them in improving their decision-making ability. When we can help people to start fast, make better decisions, and finish strong, we are really going to see a difference in the uptake of our change in the organization. These skills are going to help us to build relationships and trust. When you trust somebody, it's very easy to get on the bus with them. And here, a lot of people will will question this, especially in my detailed training, when we start talking about authenticity and trust, because a lot of people question this and say, but is that not manipulation? And I want to remind you that one of the cornerstones of emotional intelligence is authenticity, genuineness. It's a genuine empathy and compassion that we have for our colleagues and our stakeholders. It's not driven from ego. It's driven from the heart. It's driven from emotion and feeling. It's bringing the humanness back into our organizations. So the 3 skills I'm going to give you today focus on the social skills component of emotional intelligence. And really, I've drawn it as a triangle because we often see the triangle, the delta sign, as the symbol of change. And these 3 skills are self-awareness, self-management, and awareness of others. And for those of you here live and for those watching the recording, if these are the 3 skills that you focus on to begin your emotional intelligence journey as a change leader, these 3 skills will make such a big impact. So get curious about how to develop these skills. I'm going to give you some tips here today, and we'll open up for Q&A towards the end. But really, I would say that this is a great place to start. So let's have a look at each of these 3. Self-awareness. Self-awareness is, like I said earlier, it's about being aware of who you are, your emotional status, your emotional moods. Where is your energy at? If I had to ask you, how focused are you right now? Would you really have to think about that? And could you say to me that you are on a scale of 1 to 5, maybe a 4 or possibly even a 5? So really even just getting curious during the day about where is my attention at? It's a good question to ask ourselves. So be aware of things like your attention, your behaviors. Are you clear on what your personal strengths and limitations are? I recently ran an exercise with a client. In fact, I was doing it the last 2 days around social styles. And it's been about 8 years since I did my social styles. So as my own homework, I redid my social styles, and it was really interesting. And yes, I'm a red, and I'm still a red, but it was great for me just to go through that experience again and just refresh my own memory on my strengths as a red, but my limitations and how I can borrow from the sunshine yellows and the blues and the greens in the social styles. And also your self-awareness is really about the impact that you have on others. Are you aware of your impact on your team, your stakeholders, your peers, and your colleagues? So with courage and with vulnerability, maybe check in with your team and ask them, how are you doing? Or how was your presentation received? Really good to get that feedback. So building self-awareness. And the reason why I focus on self-awareness is because as change leaders, we need to be able to objectively evaluate events so that we can come up with the best plan for our stakeholders, the most appropriate plan for our stakeholders. We talk about stakeholder engagement and stakeholder management and change readiness. These are ways that we have to work in a very objective manner so we come up with the right plan for our particular endeavors. In order for us to be objective, we have to first understand how we are showing up. We have to understand our emotional status so that I'm aware that if I'm feeling exhausted, if I'm feeling anxious or frustrated, and I bring that into a client experience, how is that going to impact on my clients in the room. So with awareness, I can do almost like a self-check and choose a different emotion to bring into that experience. So it enables us to be objective in the moment. And your self-awareness leader is a self-confident leader. When I've, with intention and very consciously chosen my state, my emotion to take into an experience, and maybe that emotion is courage, I know that I can act from a very confident place. But if I get to a meeting or to a training or a facilitation or even a coaching session, and my mood is all over the place and I haven't really checked in with myself, it's very difficult for me not to be subjective in that moment and not to be distracted by my own thoughts and emotions. Does that make sense? So that ability to really check in with ourselves as change leaders is really important. So self-awareness is curious, self-awareness takes courage, and self-awareness also has an element of that wonderful soft vulnerability, because when we are willing to seek feedback from other people, we start to build our awareness. When we are disciplined enough to do our own self-awareness practice, like checking in with self, doing our reflective exercises at the end of the day. How did I do today? What could I do differently tomorrow? How did that conversation go? Where was I playing to my strengths today? Great, very good questions that we can ask ourselves. So self-awareness is the first social skill. The second one is self-management. This is, like I said, it's managing our moods, our emotions, our time, our demonstrated behavior. And importantly, an element of self-management that we don't often see, but is really important, is that ability to continuously improve oneself. What did I do well? How could I do that better? And managing that process. What did I do well and how could I do it differently? And managing that process. Because in the change arena, what we need to be able to do is very quickly redirect those unproductive impulses. When we notice those unproductive impulses rising up for ourselves, we need to be able to redirect those to more productive energies. Because like I've just said, we bring ourselves into every experience. And remember, unproductive impulses, unproductive emotions have a very narrowing and blinkering effect. And when we are working in change, we need to have a broad perspective. We need to be able to think expansively and support our clients in problem solving and navigating this complex, overwhelming space. So we need the skills, the discipline, and the courage to redirect whenever we notice we've veered off that path. So self-management is a very conscious, very disciplined practice. And again, it's about being intentional about our choices. Start small. So choose something, and I know, Melinda, it's probably 5 o'clock in the morning for you now in America, and Katerina, it's maybe like 1 o'clock in the afternoon for you, I think. Choose something in maybe for the rest of today. Maybe you've got one meeting today that you think might be quite challenging. Maybe it's tomorrow. Choose that meeting. At the end of your meeting, reflect. How did I do in that meeting? What would I do differently if I had that meeting again? And a question that I love to get my clients to ask is, what was I avoiding? And we could be avoiding being disciplined about our own awareness. We could be avoiding having the difficult conversations. Okay, so what has stopped me having the difficult conversation? Notice these limitations and how they start to show up for you. And then with this beautiful self-management comes this intentional choice to continuously improve and then plug those gaps. So self-management for me is not just about managing mood. It's also about managing our own future. So what does the future you need to focus on here today? Self-management drives resilience, that beautiful ability to keep bouncing back and move forward. It drives trustworthiness, integrity, and most importantly, that ability to have an open mind to change. And your third social skill is that awareness of others. This is noticing and acknowledging others, really tapping into that empathetic, compassionate mindset. It's listening. And here, we've got 3 levels of listening. We can listen just to take on board data. We can listen to understand the message behind the data. And the third level, which I love to talk about in this space, is we can listen for learning. When we're listening for learning, we're actively looking out for what is the opportunity here? What is the future opportunity here? When we're listening for learning, we are noticing where resistance is coming from, and we're starting to put plans in place to deal with that resistance. We are supporting our stakeholders and making sure that they feel valued. And when we notice how they are responding to us, we adjust. So in the emotional intelligence space, we talk about noticing and adjusting. Notice what's working and adjust. We don't criticize ourselves. We don't judge ourselves. Those strong and unproductive emotions, what do? They distract us. They make us very narrow-minded. And in the change space, we need to know when to engage with emotion and when to engage with logic. This is very important. So we have to be aware of where our stakeholders are at. And I've said it a couple of times already through the presentation, empathy drives curiosity and connection. Empathy is your bridge that's going to create that relationship between yourself and your stakeholders. And it allows us to build winning teams. When we are able to pay attention to awareness of self, awareness of others, and self-manage, some people call it self-regulation, we are able to build those winning teams, because we're going to support our team, but also we would select our team, making sure that we've got the right mix of people in that team. So those are your 3 social emotional intelligence skills that I really encourage you to focus on initially in your emotional intelligence journey of change. One of the things that I know people battle with is about this, how do we build our awareness of others, especially in the organizational context? So here I introduced you at the beginning of the session to the concept of an emotional culture in your organizations. So your emotional culture really is about how people in your organizations are feeling. We often manage our cognitive culture. What are our corporate values? How do we expect people to behave? What are the aspirations that people have? This is cognitive culture. It's not often that we manage our emotional culture. And we know from neuroscience that emotions determine decisions, and decisions determine behavior. So when we reverse engineer that, if we're wanting to impact behaviors, we start with how are people feeling. You know, if we're not focused on our emotional culture, then what lands up happening, for example, I've just got an example here, is that in organizations, let's take, for example, nurses. It's an easy example for us all to understand. Where nurses should be showing compassion and care for their patients and for the other staff members, when we're not taking care of their emotional needs, they can become quite indifferent and callous. So looking and focusing on our emotional culture becomes really important in the change space. And for me, when I work with teams now, project teams, and I've just completed an ERP deployment for an organization here, we introduced this as part of the change readiness assessment, was to really understand how the teams are feeling. And I use a tool called an emotional culture index. If you go onto my blog, and you can see my websites there on the bottom, revaconsultant.com, I have got a blog article on this. And your emotional culture index really allows you to, at a point in time, indicate where your teams are at in terms of 10 emotions. We focus on those emotions that are most relevant for your organization, and it allows you to take a sense check. So what we've got in this diagram, you can see 5 unproductive emotions and 5 productive emotions. The blue line representing where this particular team, and this is an example from my client, where they are currently in terms of their change, in terms of the change that they're currently undergoing. The black line represents where they expect to be, given the nature of the change and the work they're expected to do. And the pink line represents where they ideally would like to be, because they recognize that if they could feel more certain, less worried, less resistant, they would be far more effective in navigating the change and in adopting the new ways of working. So the Emotional Culture Index is a tool. It's an online survey, and your organization gets, at a point in time, an indication of how people are feeling. It's a wonderful way to build up that awareness of others. If you would like to learn a little bit more about the ECI, please have a read of my blog, but I'm also able to send you a sample report. The ECI itself, running the survey, costs you nothing. I'm able to run that survey at a no-cost fee for the survey itself. And then any debriefing, any coaching that happens off the back of that, we would then quote on. But just to get a report and to run the survey, that in itself is a no-cost offer from myself through the GENOS organization. So please connect with me if that is something that you're interested in. So in summary, emotional intelligence in change leadership is how we are going to improve collaboration. It's going to help us handle difficult conversations because we are being objective. We are being aware of the other person. We're bringing empathy and compassion. We are managing emotional states. We're managing stressful times, not only for self, but we are inspiring others to do the same. Because we've got that expansive thinking and expansive reasoning, we know we can problem solve with confidence, and we can provide constructive feedback. Constructive feedback means that we are curious about providing that learning experience for the other person, and we can communicate with tact and finesse. So for me, this really is almost building the business case around why emotional intelligence is important in the change management space. Got a few more minutes and I want to leave some time for Q&As. So my 3 things that I'd love for you to take away from today is really just remembering that curiosity about what do they need me to learn? And what do I, my future self, need to focus on? And these are the 3 highlights. If I encourage you to focus on any three aspects from today. The three social emotional intelligence competencies or skills. Get curious about how to develop your self-awareness, your self-management, and awareness of others. This is really going to stand you in good stead in the change space. Think about how your teams are feeling. How are they feeling? And if you are struggling with your change, and if you're finding it hard to navigate that reluctance and resistance, please connect with me and let's see how we can support you with an ECI in your organizations. And then lastly, please remember the way we feel, our emotions, influences our decisions, and that influences our behaviors. So when you are noticing people demonstrating behaviors that are out of character or demonstrating reluctance or resistance, I encourage you to think about what is their emotional state that might be driving those behaviors. So let's open it up to any questions or any, if you've got any insights, if anything has resonated for you here today, you can either unmute or pop it into the chat.
Well, I don't know if Melinda wants to ask anything, but maybe I can just, yeah, unmute and pop my question.
Perfect. Go for it.
First of all, thank you so much for this little class. It was very nice. I really enjoyed it. And on my side, so I work on innovation design agency. So we're consultants. We work with other organizations and we try to do these transformational projects and so on. And sometimes we see that is, most of the times, a problem or issue of like culture change and things like that. So I was wondering, within like transformational projects inside the organizations and people needing to change their way of working, things like that, how do you approach that? And so that's my first question, and maybe a bit more in detail. In the beginning, you were talking about connect and collaborate and the skills of people to change. So I was wondering if you have any exercises that you do in your workshops that could, empower people or make them a bit more comfortable with change. Just inspiration things to inspire our workshops and ways.
Fabulous. So the space of innovation is so exciting, and for me the space of innovation can often be quite fast-paced. Am I correct? Right. And I just, at the back of my mind, Katerina, I always remind myself of that quote which was on one of the slides. People don't change. I'm just going to actually, what I'm going to do is I'm going to come off, just if you would like to, that's my LinkedIn, Alison J. Coates, just on there in my website. So you can just take a note of that, and I'm going to stop share so that we can actually talk. I'll stop share now. Great. So the thing that I always remind myself is that quote that I had on one of the slides. People don't change when we want them to. People change when their perspective changes. And we can't really change another person's perspective until we ourselves understand them. So that's why we always do things like change readiness and training needs analysis and all of these very cognitive, very behavior-based assessments. But what about really getting curious about how people are feeling? And I think that the world is moving on now. It's becoming more acceptable. I'd love for it to be totally acceptable, but it is becoming slowly more acceptable to talk about emotions in the workplace. And when we can have those courageous conversations about how are you feeling? What's going on for you today? And allowing our stakeholders to feel like we've created this psychologically safe space for them to express how they're feeling, we will start to see a change. in how people adapt and adopt the things that we are asking them to do differently. So I hope that answers your first question. So just remember that thing about perspective. Okay. The second question around exercises around collaboration and connecting. There's so many different ways that we can do that. You know, for me, collaboration and connecting is all about encouraging people to develop that, to develop empathy and compassion. We often say, let's walk a mile in somebody else's shoes. But actually, in the change space, sometimes we've actually got to put their skin on. We've actually got to get into their whole body to fully experience, because it's not just about the feet and the shoes, it's about the whole experience. And there again, we've got that emotional aspect, haven't we? So great ways to get people to connect better is just to have connect time. How much time do you create in your projects, in your teams, even for your clients, just for people to connect? Not for people to do work, but just to connect on a Friday afternoon. And even in this remote world that we live in now, if we want to teach people how to do something, let's do that thing. So introduce some fun ways for people to get to know each other, Katerina. Yeah. Good. Does that help you?
Yeah, exactly. Like sometimes we are straight up like thinking in like templates and ways for people to work together, and sometimes it's more simple than that. It's just letting people just share and talk about themselves and just create this safe space atmosphere that you were talking about.
Bring it back. Bring it back to basics. Yes.
Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you.
Yeah.
Great questions. So Melinda, I'm not sure if you have any questions. I know it's very early in the morning for you. You're probably trying to get your breakfast on the go and all kinds of things.
No, it was actually just very thorough and some great information, wonderful insights. I work with a very diverse group of people with cross departments, and trying to implement change over multiple departments while you're busy is very difficult, and trying to just be human, I think, is often lost. And I think you touched on that very well.
Great. So thank you so much, ladies. It's been, this is my passion, having spent so long as a management consultant stroke project manager. And these are all the things that I wish somebody had shown me 10 years ago, because I know I am a very A-type personality. I think a lot of project managers are, and we like to get things right. We like to be perfect. We like to follow the process. We don't like to step out of, we're very governance driven. We can be quite governance driven. But I've learned that if I'd brought more of Alison into my projects, I would have enjoyed, and I loved my career, I would have enjoyed my career so much more. And people around me would have enjoyed, and I would have supported them in navigating that change as well. So please feel free to connect with me. You ladies have got my email address now. Let me know if you use any of these, and also to the people who are listening on the recording, because I am sending it out to a few people. Please connect with your questions. Please connect with me when you try any of these things, and let me know how it goes. I'm very happy to jump on a 10-15 minute Zoom call and just talk through something if that's what you would like. So thank you very much, and have a great afternoon and have a great day. It's nearly the finish. I'm almost finished work now, so
yeah. Thank you so much.
You're very welcome.
And thanks for being so open to help out in the future.
Oh, anytime. It's my passion project, so I'm very happy. Lovely to meet you both.
Thank you so much, guys. Have a great day.
Bye.